The string quartet had just started playing Canon in D, and the sweet, heavy scent of white lilies filled the air of the church vestibule. I stood there in a dress that cost more than my car, feeling the heavy lace scratch against my arms. My heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs, a mix of excitement and nerves. This was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. My father squeezed my hand, ready to walk me out to the hundreds of guests waiting in the pews. But right as I took my first step toward the double doors, a cold hand grabbed my bare shoulder. It was Clara, my wedding planner. Her face, usually calm and professional, was drained of all color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. She leaned in close, her voice shaking so hard I could barely understand her. "Dahlia, stop! You cannot go out there. The final payment didn't go through." I froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What do you mean?" I whispered back, trying to keep my voice down so my dad wouldn't hear. "The card was declined," Clara hissed, checking her clipboard frantically. "And the backup check bounced this morning. We called the bank. The account is empty." My stomach dropped all the way to the floor. I knew exactly who was responsible. My future in-laws, specifically my fiancé's mother, Lorelei, had insisted on paying for the venue, the catering, and the flowers. It was her grand welcome to the family gift. She had made a huge show of it for months. Now, with 5 minutes on the clock, the truth was out. "My name is Dahlia," I thought, a cold fury replacing my panic. And 5 minutes before my own wedding, I found out my in-laws lied about paying for everything. I looked at Clara, my eyes hardening. "Give me the microphone." Clara hesitated, clutching the wireless mic she used for announcements. "Dahlia, are you sure?" "Give it to me," I demanded. I stepped through the doors, leaving my father behind. I didn't walk to the altar. I walked to the center of the stage, the train of my dress sweeping the floor. I stared at the confused crowd, took a deep breath that rattled in my lungs, and said, "No payment, no wedding." The room went silent, then the gasps began. The silence that followed my announcement was heavy and suffocating, like a thick blanket had been thrown over the entire congregation. It was broken only by the sharp intake of breath from 300 guests. My fiancé, Ansel, stood at the altar in his tuxedo. His face turned a ghostly shade of white as he stared at me. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, completely frozen and unable to process what was happening. He didn't step forward. He didn't speak. He just stood there. In the front row, reserved for the most important family members, his mother, Lorelei, stood up slowly. She was wearing a floor-length silver gown that looked like liquid metal. She smoothed the fabric over her hips and glared at me with eyes that could cut glass. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed, as if I were a waitress who had brought her the wrong order. "You're embarrassing yourself, Dahlia," she hissed, her voice cutting through the tension of the silent room. "Get back in line and finish the ceremony." I gripped the microphone tighter, my knuckles turning white. "I'm not the one who committed fraud," I replied, my voice shaking slightly but gaining strength. I refused to move another inch until the vendors were paid. I motioned for Clara, who was peeking out from the side stage. The planner, trembling visibly, walked onto the stage and connected her tablet to the projection system. Moments later, the unpaid invoices flashed onto the giant screens meant for our romantic photo slideshow. The giant red, "Overdue" stamps were visible to everyone in the room. The guests gasped again, whispers of "Is this real?" And "Oh my goodness" circulated through the pews. Lorelei didn't flinch. She crossed her arms and sneered, loud enough for the first 10 rows to hear. "We don't pay until after we approve the event. That is how business works. If you want the money, you perform the show." Humiliation burned through my veins like fire. I stood there in my white gown, feeling exposed, foolish, and incredibly small. For the last 6 months, Lorelei had promised to cover the wedding costs. She called it her gift to welcome me into the family. She had made such a big deal about it at the engagement party, toasting to her generosity. But looking back, standing there in the ruins of my big day, I realized it was never a gift. It was a leash. Because she was paying, she had demanded control over every single detail. She picked the flowers, dismissing my choice of peonies for her preferred orchids. She changed the menu 3 times. She even tried to veto my dress because it wasn't traditional enough. I had swallowed my pride and agreed to her changes because I thought she was being generous. I thought this was how families helped each other. Now, standing on that stage, the realization hit me hard. I had been manipulated. She wanted the control without the cost. She wanted to play the generous matriarch in public while leaving me with the bill at the last second, knowing I would be too ashamed to stop the ceremony once the music started. Ansel finally moved. He walked down the aisle toward me, his steps quick and nervous. I thought he was coming to defend me. I thought he was coming to tell his mother to pay up. Instead, he leaned in close and whispered urgency in his voice. "Dahlia, please, just go through with it. We'll sort it later. Don't make a scene. You're acting crazy." My heart shattered into a million pieces. He wasn't worried about me. He wasn't worried about the lie. He just wanted to save face. He wanted me to marry him and absorb the debt silently so his mommy wouldn't look bad. I looked at Ansel, really looked at him, for the first time in minutes. He wasn't the man I thought I was marrying. He was a scared little boy afraid of his mother. I stepped back from him, creating a physical distance that matched the emotional chasm opening between us. I raised the microphone to my lips one more time. The room went quiet again, everyone waiting for my surrender. They expected me to cry, to apologize, to walk down the aisle like a good little bride. "If the people who paid for this can't even respect a contract," I said, my voice steady and loud, booming through the speakers, "then maybe this wedding was a mistake. I won't start a marriage based on deceit and debt. I am not a prop for your social status." The shock on Ansel's face was satisfying, but what happened next was even better. A slow clap started from the back of the room. I looked up. It was my cousin Mike. Then another person joined in. My college friends, my aunts, even some of Ansel's distant relatives started clapping. They were cheering for me. They saw the injustice, and they were on my side. Lorelai's face turned a deep shade of crimson. She realized she had lost control of the narrative. She grabbed her purse, huffed loudly, and stormed out of the venue's side exit, her silver heels clicking angrily on the floor. I watched her go, then looked at Ansel. He stood between me and the exit. He looked at me, then at the door his mother had just exited. Without a word to me, no apology, no hug, he turned and ran after her. He chose to follow his mother instead of his bride. I didn't cry, not yet. The adrenaline was still pumping too hard for tears. I reached up and unpinned my long cathedral veil, feeling the tug on my hair. I let it drop to the floor in a heap of white tulle. It felt like shedding a heavy skin, a weight I didn't know I was carrying. I turned my back on the altar, on the confused guests, and on the life I thought I wanted. I walked straight down the aisle alone. As I passed the pews, I saw people holding up their phones. The red recording lights were blinking. I knew this would be on the internet within the hour. I knew strangers would be judging me. But honestly, I didn't care. Walking out of those double doors was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most freeing. The cool afternoon air outside hit my face, drying the sweat on my forehead. I walked straight to the valet stand, my white dress dragging on the pavement, picking up dirt, leaves, and grease. The valet guy, a young man who looked about 20, stared at me with wide eyes. He had clearly heard the commotion from inside. The shouting had carried. He fetched my car keys without me even asking for a ticket. As he handed them to me, he looked me right in the eye. "You did the right thing, miss," he said quietly. "Nobody deserves that. You look like a warrior." His kindness almost broke me. I nodded, unable to speak, got into my car and drove away from the venue, leaving the chaos, the cake, and the groom behind. The next morning, I woke up in my own apartment. For a second, I thought it was a nightmare, but the heavy feeling in my chest told me it was real. My phone was buzzing incessantly on the nightstand, vibrating like an angry hornet. I picked it up and opened social media. There it was. A video of me at the altar, titled "Bride Cancels Wedding Over Venmo Drama," had millions of views. I was trending on 3 different platforms. I scrolled through the comments, my heart racing in my chest. The internet was divided. Half the people were calling me a hero. "Queen behavior," one comment said. "Know your worth," said another. They praised my backbone for standing up to a toxic family, but the other half were vicious. They called me a gold digger and a bridezilla who cared more about money than love. They said I should have married him anyway if I really loved him and figured out the money later. It hurt to read, but I knew the truth. I decided not to hide. I opened my photo gallery and found the screenshots of the unpaid invoices Clara had sent me, along with the text messages from Lorelei promising to pay months ago. I posted them all with a simple caption: "Receipts, dates, promises." The narrative shifted instantly. People saw the dates, the amounts, and the lies. They saw the proof. Just as I put my phone down, a text came in from Ansel. It was short and demanding. "We need to talk privately. Stop posting. You are ruining everything." Ansel showed up at my apartment an hour later. He was holding a bouquet of cheap gas station flowers, carnations that were already wilting. He looked disheveled and tired, his eyes red-rimmed. He tried to smile as I opened the door, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a pathetic attempt at charm. "Mom just got confused," he said, stepping into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. He tried to brush past me. "She thought the payment went through. It was a banking error. The bank flagged the transaction because it was so large." I crossed my arms, blocking him from entering the living room. I wasn't going to let him sit on my couch and lie to me. "A banking error? Ansel, she told me to my face in front of 300 people that she wouldn't pay until she approved the event. That's not a banking error. That's a power play." He flinched. He knew I was right, but he couldn't admit it. He was programmed to defend her. "Look, we can fix this," he pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "Just take down the posts. You're making us look bad. Mom is really crying." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound that surprised even me. "So, are you paying her debt or mine?" I asked. "Because those vendors are threatening to sue me for the cancellations." He looked down at his shoes. "You should apologize to her, Dahlia. She's really upset about the public humiliation." That was the final straw. He wanted me to apologize for being lied to. He wanted me to say sorry to the woman who ruined my day. I didn't say another word. I just shut the door firmly in his face and locked the deadbolt. After Ansel left, I sat on my couch and let my mind wander back through the last 2 years. I needed to understand how I had missed this. But the truth was, the signs had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Flashbacks flooded my brain. I remembered how she loaned him money for his car down payment. It seemed nice at the time, but then she made him drive her to all her appointments for 6 months to work it off. She treated him like a chauffeur. She made him justify every expense, checking his bank statements like he was a teenager with an allowance, not a 30-year-old man. I remembered a dinner we had shortly after we got engaged. Lorelei had had too much expensive wine. She looked at me across the table, swirling her glass, and said with a smirk, "Dahlia's lucky you didn't marry up, Ansel. She needs this lifestyle more than we do." At the time, I laughed it off as a bad joke, or maybe just a clumsy compliment. Now I saw it for what it was: contempt. She thought I was beneath them. She thought she was buying me. My phone pinged, snapping me out of my memories. It was Clara, the wedding planner. She had done some digging into the vendor cancellations. "Dahlia, you need to know this," she wrote. "The catering wasn't just unpaid. It was canceled 3 days ago by Lorelei." I stared at the screen. She had canceled the food on purpose. She wanted the guests to starve or for me to scramble and beg her for help. It was sabotage, pure and simple. I called my best friend, Fern, immediately. She came over within 20 minutes, bringing a bottle of wine and a fury that matched my own. Fern was the kind of friend who would help you bury a body, no questions asked. "She canceled the food," Fern screamed, packing my living room like a caged tiger. "That is psychotic, Dahlia. That is actually evil." Fern pulled out her phone. "Wait, I have something too." Clara sent me screenshots of her conversation with Lorelei from last week. "She didn't want to show you before the wedding because she thought she could fix it, but you need to see this." She handed me the phone. I read the texts and my blood turned to ice. Lorelei had texted Clara, "Don't remind Dahlia about the payment deadline. She needs to be humbled. She thinks she's running the show, but she needs to learn her place. Let her sweat a little." I read it twice. Needs to be humbled. The cruelty was breathtaking. She wasn't just cheap, she was malicious. She was willing to humiliate her own son just to teach me a lesson about hierarchy. The emotional hit was severe. I felt a wave of rage so potent it made my hands shake. But beneath the rage, the humiliation vanished. I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I was focused. She wanted to teach me a lesson about power? Fine. I decided right then and there that she was going to learn what the word humble actually felt like. I wasn't going to just walk away. I was going to fight back. The next morning, I didn't call Ansel. I didn't cry in bed. I called a lawyer. I found a man named Cedric who specialized in contract law and had a reputation for being calm but lethal. I met him in his office, a sleek space with glass walls and leather chairs. I brought every contract, text message, and email I had printed out. I laid them all out on his mahogany desk. Cedric looked over the papers in silence for 10 minutes. He adjusted his glasses and looked up at me. "This is interesting," he said, his voice smooth and deep. "Most people don't realize that a verbal agreement to pay, backed up by written confirmation like these emails, is a binding contract. Plus, her name is on the vendor contracts as the primary payer. She signed here and here." I felt a spark of hope. "So, can I do anything?" I asked. "Or am I just stuck with the cancellation fees?" Cedric smiled, a shark-like grin that made me feel safe for the first time in days. "You can sue her for breach of agreement," he said. "You can sue her for the emotional distress caused by the intentional infliction of harm. And given this text about humbling you, we can prove malice. That changes everything. You can sue her, Dahlia, and you will win." We filed the lawsuit 3 days later. We did it quietly. No social media posts, no warnings, no dramatic announcements. I wanted her to be blindsided just like I was. The suit demanded payment for all the cancellation fees the vendors were charging me, plus significant damages for the emotional trauma and the cost of the wasted wedding preparations. The twist came quickly. Lorelai's attorney called Cedric within 24 hours of her being served. Apparently, Lorelai was furious. She had been served the papers at her country club, right in front of her bridge group. She was screaming on the phone that the lawsuit was frivolous, that she would bury me in legal fees, and that I was a beggar. But Cedric told me not to worry. "Her anger means she's scared," he said. "If she thought she was right, she would be calm. She knows she messed up." The court date was set for the following month. That night my phone rang. It was Ansel again. His voice was trembling. "Dahlia, please drop the lawsuit. Mom is losing her mind. You're going to ruin her reputation," he was begging. "She can't handle this kind of press. She's sick with worry." I gripped the phone, feeling no pity. "She should have thought about her reputation before she tried to ruin my life," I said coldly. "She wanted to play games. Now we're playing. Tell her I'll see her in court." I thought we were keeping the lawsuit quiet, but legal filings are public record. Someone found it. A week later, a copy of the lawsuit hit social media. A TikTok investigator broke down the legal jargon for the masses, highlighting the text about humbling me that was included in the evidence list. The internet exploded again. The twist was immediate. Public opinion, which had been somewhat divided between Team Bride and Team Groom, flipped completely. Everyone realized I wasn't a gold digger. I was a victim of a cruel, calculated attack. People started using the hashtag Venmo mother-in-law. Memes of Lorelai's face, taken from photos Ansel had posted years ago, started circulating. They had captions like, "Requires approval to pay for pizza," and "Declines card, demands respect." It was viral justice. It was vindication, but it was also overwhelming. Lorelai was being roasted on a global scale. Her carefully curated image as a wealthy, benevolent socialite was crumbling before her eyes. Late that afternoon, her event planning company, Luxury Events, issued a stiff statement on Instagram claiming the allegations were false and that they would be pursuing defamation charges. But the comments section was a war zone. People were posting the screenshots of her texts I had shared earlier. She couldn't delete them fast enough. The fallout for Lorelai was swift and brutal. Because she owned a high-end event planning business, her reputation was her currency. Clients entrusted her with their biggest days. They didn't want to work with a woman who sabotaged weddings for sport. Within days, stories leaked that she had lost 3 major corporate contracts. A huge charity gala canceled their partnership with her. Her brand was becoming toxic. She didn't take it well. She went on a local news station to give an exclusive interview. She sat there, dabbing fake tears with a silk handkerchief, and blamed me publicly. She called me a scammer who had tricked her son into a relationship just to get to her money. She claimed I was extorting her. Watching it on TV, I felt sick. She was lying so effortlessly. She looked so convincing to anyone who didn't know the truth. I called Cedric in a panic. "She's lying. She's on TV lying about me. We have to say something. We have to deny it." Cedric's voice was calm on the other end of the line. "No, Dahlia, let her talk. She's digging her own grave. Every lie she tells on camera can be disproven in court with the evidence we have. It helps our case. Silence is your best weapon right now. Let her destroy herself." I trusted him. I bit my tongue and kept my mouth shut while she destructed. While preparing for the trial, I had to sort through some shared finances I still had with Ansel. I logged into a joint savings account we had opened to save for a house. We had put thousands of dollars into it over the last year. It was empty. My heart stopped. I rubbed my eyes and refreshed the page. Still zero. I dug deeper into the transaction history and saw that the money had been transferred out months ago into an account under Lorelai's name. I confronted Ansel via text, sending him a screenshot. He admitted it after a long pause. "Mom said she needed to hold it for safekeeping so we wouldn't spend it frivolously before the wedding. It's an account she controls. She said she was investing it for us." The twist made me gasp. He was financially trapped. He couldn't leave her even if he wanted to because she held every dime he had ever earned. She had convinced him that she was protecting his money, but she was actually stealing his independence. Suddenly, I understood his fear. He wasn't just a mama's boy, he was a hostage. He had no financial agency. Empathy pricked at my heart, but I pushed it down. I couldn't save him. If I tried to pull him out, he would just drag me down with him. I decided to free him in the only way I could, by destroying the control she had without trying to save him directly. The day of the deposition arrived. This was the pre-trial meeting where lawyers asked questions under oath. Lorelai showed up to the lawyer's office dripping in diamonds, wearing a white suit as if she were the bride. She looked smug, confident that her money and status would intimidate me and my cheap lawyer. She sat across the table, checking her watch, barely looking at me. Cedric began the questioning. Lorelai answered with snarky comments, denying everything. She claimed the texts were jokes. She claimed the cancellation was a mistake. Then Cedric pulled out his laptop. "Mrs. Vance, did you leave a voicemail for your friend Margaret on the morning of the wedding?" Lorelai frowned, confused. "I don't recall. I talked to many people." Cedric pressed play. Lorelai's voice filled the room, loud and clear. "I staged a tantrum to test the bride. I want to see if she breaks. If she cancels, I save money. If she stays, I own her. Either way, I win." The room went deadly silent. The judge, who was overseeing the deposition due to the high profile of the case, let his eyebrows shoot up. Lorelai turned pale beneath her heavy makeup. She realized she had just incriminated herself on tape. Margaret must have shared the voicemail. The glitch defense was dead. The misunderstanding defense was dead. She had admitted it was a game. 2 days after the disastrous deposition, Lorelai's legal team reached out. They were panicked. They wanted to settle. They offered to pay the vendor debts plus a small sum for my trouble, on the condition that I signed a strict non-disclosure agreement, NDA, and publicly retracted my statements. They wanted to buy my silence to save her business from total collapse. I sat in Cedric's office, reading the offer. It was a lot of money. It would cover my debts, my student loans, and leave me with a nice cushion. It was tempting. But then I looked at the NDA clause. I would have to lie. I would have to say I was wrong, that Lorelai was a saint, and that it was all a big misunderstanding. I looked at Cedric. "I decline," I said firmly. "This isn't about money, it's about respect. I won't lie for her. She doesn't get to buy her way out of this." We rejected the offer. That evening, Ansel showed up at my door again. He looked defeated, darker circles under his eyes than before. He looked thinner. "She's cutting me off," he said, his voice hollow. Because you wouldn't settle, she froze my assets. She kicked me out of the guest house. I have nothing, Dahlia. He looked at me, waiting for me to fix it. He wanted me to take the deal so he could get his allowance back. But I just nodded. I'm sorry, Ansel, but that's between you and her. You're an adult. Without the settlement, the lawsuit moved forward, and the press coverage intensified. Lorelai's business began to collapse completely. Vendors she had worked with for years started coming forward with their own horror stories of late payments and bullying. The floodgates opened. It seemed everyone had a story about the Venmo mother-in-law. Then came the twist. Her own accountant, trying to save his own skin before the ship sank, leaked information to the authorities. It turned out Lorelai had been using fake invoices from her events to launder money through her company to avoid taxes. The wedding scam was just the tip of the iceberg. She was now being investigated for federal fraud. I was at home when I heard the news on the television. My phone rang. It was Lorelai. She was crying, hysterical. Her composure was gone. You've destroyed my life, she screamed into the phone. Everything I built, my legacy. Are you happy now? You ruined everything because you couldn't take a joke. I listened to her sobbing, realizing that even now, she blamed me. She took no responsibility. She thought she was the victim because I fought back. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the woman who had terrorized me for 2 years unravel. You did this, she wailed. You petty little girl, you should have just listened to me. She was desperate, grasping at anything to hurt me. She wanted me to feel guilty. She wanted me to apologize. I didn't do anything, Lorelai, I said calmly, my voice steady. I just sent the invoice. You're the one who refused to pay it. You're the one who canceled the food. You're the one who committed fraud. It was the simple truth. If she had just treated me with basic decency, none of this would have happened. She had destroyed herself with her own arrogance. The line went quiet for a moment, save for her ragged breathing. Then she whispered, her voice low and chilling. You sound just like me. The words hit me hard. Was I becoming cold like her? No, I was becoming strong. There is a difference between being cruel and being firm. I hung up the phone. I didn't want to be like her, but I refused to be her victim anymore. A month later, a popular finance and culture podcast covered my story. They played the clip of me at the wedding, specifically the moment I said, Venmo or Vows. The internet loved it. It became a meme, a catchphrase for setting boundaries. Venmo or Vows was printed on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers. People used it to describe any situation where they demanded respect before commitment. The podcast hosts invited me on for an interview. I told my side of the story, not just the drama, but the financial lesson. I talked about the importance of financial transparency in relationships. I talked about checking accounts, reading contracts, and knowing who holds the purse strings. The episode went viral. Suddenly, I wasn't just the jilted bride or the victim. I was a voice of reason. I was an expert. Offers started pouring in. Publishers wanted a book. TV shows wanted interviews. Cedric sat me down over coffee. Dahlia, he said, sliding a contract across the table. You could turn this into something bigger. You have a platform now. Don't let it go to waste. I realized he was right. I could build something from the ashes of my wedding. I could help other women avoid the same trap. I took the leap. I launched a consulting business called Venmo or Vows. It was a service for brides and couples to help them navigate the financial and legal aspects of weddings. I helped them review contracts, set up joint accounts correctly, and spot red flags with in-laws who used money as a weapon. The business exploded online. Women from all over the world reached out, sharing their stories of financial abuse and manipulation. I hired a small team. I was working harder than I ever had, but I felt fulfilled. I had turned my worst day into a career. I was helping people standing up for themselves. One night, late in the office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ansel. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. I saw your website, he wrote. It looks great. I'm finally moving out of her house. I need help getting free from her financial hold. Can you recommend a lawyer who isn't expensive? I agreed to meet Ansel one last time for coffee. I owed him that much. or maybe I just needed to see for myself that he was really changing. He looked different when he walked into the cafe. He was tired, but he looked lighter. He was wearing a cheaper shirt than usual, a flannel instead of designer silk, and I saw him park a beat-up sedan outside instead of the luxury car Lorelei had leased for him. He sat down and didn't order anything. "I'm sorry, Dahlia," he said, and for the first time it sounded sincere. "You were right about everything. I was weak. I let her run my life because it was easier than fighting her. I was a coward." He looked at his hands, which were rougher than I remembered. "I'm working a regular job now. I'm in sales. I'm paying my own rent for a studio apartment." I looked at him with a mix of sadness and pride. He was finally growing up, 10 years too late. "I'm glad, Ansel," I said gently, "but you have a long way to go." I told him, "You have to do this for you, not for me, then grow stronger." He nodded, accepting the critique. Then he reached into his bag and slid a thick envelope across the table. I stared at the envelope. "What is this?" I asked. Ansel pushed it closer to me. "Open it." I tore the flap open. Inside was a cashier's check. I looked at the number. The amount was exactly equal to the debt I had been left with on the wedding day, every vendor, every cancellation fee. It was thousands of dollars. I looked up at him, shocked. "How? Lorelei's assets are frozen. Where did you get this?" Ansel shook his head. "It's not from her. It's from me. I sold my watch, my vintage record collection, and I took out a small loan from the bank in my own name. I worked double shifts." He took a deep breath. "I wanted to pay you back. I didn't want you to carry the cost of my family's mess. It was my fault for not stopping her." For the first time, he was taking actual responsibility. He wasn't using his mother's money to fix a problem. He was using his own sweat and sacrifice. "I still love you," he added, his voice cracking. "I know I lost you, and I accept that, but I needed you to know that I'm trying to be the man you deserved." The emotional core of the moment hit me hard. I looked at the check, then at Ansel. I still cared about him. Part of me wanted to grab him and say we could try again now that he was free. We could start over with no money and just love. But I knew better. The trust was broken. The wedding day had revealed cracks in our foundation that money couldn't fix. He had hesitated when it mattered most. He had chosen her first. That scar would always be there. I slowly slid the check back across the table. "I don't need this, Ansel," I said softly. "My business is doing well. I paid off the debts myself weeks ago. I'm okay." He tried to protest, pushing the envelope back. "No, please." I raised a hand. "You keep it. Start over. Use this to build a life that is actually yours. Use it for your rent, for your freedom." He stared at the check, tears welling in his eyes. He understood. It was a final gift, but also a final goodbye. He stood up, nodded once, and whispered, "Thank you, Dahlia." He walked away from the table, out the door and out of my life, for real this time. Months later, I sat in a professional recording studio, wearing heavy headphones, facing a famous finance podcaster. The episode was titled "The Bride Who Said Venmo or Vows." We had spent the last hour talking about contracts, boundaries, and self-worth. The host leaned into the microphone for the final question. The red, on air, light glowed brightly. "So, Dahlia," the host asked, her voice warm and curious. "Looking back at everything, the humiliation, the lawsuit, the breakup, the viral madness, would you do it again? Would you stop the wedding?" I didn't hesitate. I leaned into the mic and grinned. "In a heartbeat," I said, "because the cost of that wedding was high, but the cost of losing myself would have been higher. I saved myself from a lifetime of being second best in my own marriage." The host smiled and signed off. "And that's a wrap." I took off the headphones, feeling lighter than I ever had. I had told my story and I owned it. Lorelei eventually settled the fraud charges to avoid jail time, but she lost her business. She disappeared from social media and moved to a smaller town, her reputation in the city completely shattered. She was no longer the queen of the social scene. Ansel was out there somewhere, building a quiet, modest life on his own terms. I hoped he would make it. I hoped he would find someone he could stand up for. And me, I was busy. I had a book to write and clients to help. I spent my days teaching women that a ring shouldn't cost you your dignity. I taught them to never sign a wedding contract without a backup plan and to ensure their partners were truly partners. I walked out of the studio into the bright afternoon sun. I didn't lose a husband that day on the altar. I gained self-respect. And I learned the most valuable lesson of all. If love can't pay its share, it's not worth the vows.